The world is at war. It started a long time ago. We're going to go into that. I'm going to explain exactly why. The United States is currently at war. I'm focusing on Artsakh, Nagorno-Karabakh, this war. But you need to understand, this is just one war in an ongoing conflict that we need to pay attention to get people's attention to. There is war happening there, but there's war happening all around us. And let me just back up a little bit. In my research of the Armenian genocide in World War I, as I'm reading, I'm like, oh, this was like, there was the first Balkan War, and then there was the second Balkan War. Oh, and then there was this thing that happened in Sarajevo, the Archduke Franz Ferdinand getting assassinated, and suddenly everybody on the planet is involved in this war. And then it ends, and that's the end of World War I, and then we come to this, there's World War II. So over here in the West, we think of World War I and World War II. I mean, that's how we think of it. But as I was researching and realizing it's just war all the time over there. It's just people killing each other. And a lot of times it's the weak and innocent and the peace-loving that get attacked. And so we are at war. I'm going to explain how warfare has evolved and what we're facing right now. All right, we will start. Generations of warfare. First generation warfare refers to ancient and post-classical battles fought with massive manpower using phalanx lines and column tactics with uniformed soldiers governed by the state. Second generation warfare is the early modern tactics used after the invention of the rifle, musket, and breech-loading weapons and continuing through the development of the machine gun and indirect fire. The term second generation warfare was created by the U.S. military in 1989. So they're just giving terms for types of warfare. Third generation warfare focuses on using late modern technology-derived tactics of leveraging speed, stealth, and surprise to bypass the enemy's lines and collapse their forces from the rear. Essentially, this was the end of linear warfare on a tactical level, with units seeking not simply to meet each other face-to-face, but to outmaneuver each other to gain the greatest advantage. Then we come to fourth generation warfare. I'm going to read this and then break it down a little bit. Fourth generation warfare, as presented by Lind, the author of, or one of the guys that coined even the terms. Fourth generation warfare, is presented by Lind et al., is characterized by a postmodern return to decentralized forms of warfare, blurring the lines between war and politics, combatants and civilians, due to nation-states' loss of their near monopoly on combat forces, returning to modes of conflict common in pre-modern times. All right, what the heck does that mean? Let's just give some, here is a list of elements. If you describe it, it's easier to grasp. So elements of fourth generation warfare is defined as conflicts which involve the following elements: complex and long-term, terrorism, which is killing of people and destruction of property for the reason of terrorizing, which is generally aimed at civilian targets. A non-national or transnational base, highly decentralized. A direct attack on the enemy's culture, including genocidal acts against civilians. Highly sophisticated psychological warfare and propaganda, especially through media manipulation, internet trolls, bots, and lawfare. All available pressures are used: political, economic, social, and military. So what kind of war are we in? Well, if you're paying attention to the news, subscribe and share, right? I got to throw this in here. I don't want to get distracted from the subject matter, but you've got to subscribe and share this so that people can understand what the heck is going on in the world around us right now. Subscribe, share, and click the notification bell. So, if you're following the news, now, keep in mind, I don't know who won the election when I'm recording this. I'm recording it on November 3rd. I had a media blackout called a self-imposed media blackout. And even in my region where we live, there's a scheduled power outage tomorrow on November 4th. So I may be in the dark all day tomorrow as well, or by the time you're watching this. I mean, I'll know what the results were. I'll know if there was a declared winner or if we're going to recounts and lawsuits in the Supreme Court, etc. But aside from that election, This kind of warfare, fourth generation warfare, is being waged against the United States every day, all day. I mean, look at it. Non-national or transnational base, highly decentralized. There's a thing called Antifa, which it looks like they've been funded by foreign powers, right? The feds are working on that, but some of the evidence coming out is like there are enemy combatants that are stirring up conflict within the United States. Rather than sticking a gun on the border, a cannon or a bomb on the border and attacking the land, attack it from within. We've been an open society. We've welcomed the international community to come into our universities and our businesses and come and be a part of this one happy family that we all are. Except there are bad actors out there, and we've just smiled and let them deceive us and come on in and start disrupting our infrastructure with propaganda. I mean, it says it right here. Highly sophisticated psychological warfare and propaganda, especially through media manipulation, internet trolls, bots, and lawfare. And the lawfare thing is particularly insidious. This is people pay for political appointments or political positions so that their side will have an advantage, like a district attorney or a Supreme Court, a state Supreme Court. People in politics get funding from who knows where. It's impossible to track all the money from everybody. There are lawyers that are defending terrorists. There are lawyers that are defending the combatants. There are violent rioters who are just being turned loose. And that's the lawfare side. It's like take advantage of the American legal system to disrupt the American system. All right. I'm not going to belabor this point, but fourth generation warfare, we are in it. I'm going to go one step further. Where is it? Did I misplace? There's another article. Oh, here it is. So this is from Wired from like 11 years ago. How to win a fifth generation war. I'm just going to read a little bit of this. Well, maybe most of it. In recent years, military thinkers have been focusing on fourth generation warfare. That is, conflicts over ideas waged by what author John Robb calls ad hoc warriors. Compared that to industrialized third generation warfare by traditional armies over the land and resources. The U.S. and its allies are really good at third generation warfare. And 5 years into the Iraq War, keep in mind this was in 2009. We are beginning to get pretty good at fourth generation war too, especially in encouraging everyday Iraqis to reject hardliners' visions of the world. Okay, so this is focused on the Islamic extremists. I'm going to read a little bit more, probably just down to here. Fifth generation war is what happens when the world's disaffected direct their desperation at the most obvious symbol of everything they lack, taking advantage of the tactics and battlefields pioneered by more highly organized fourth-gen warriors. The symbol is the United States, the world's sole superpower. This is 11 years ago. China was barely on its way up. Even Russia was not considered a superpower. The difference, I would say, today is there are two superpowers, China and the United States. And I'll get to that in a minute. I'm going to wrap this up and bring China into the picture here. And the fifth-gen fighters' weapon of choice is political stalemate. This is very important. Fifth-gen fighters' weapon of choice is political stalemate, contends Marine Lieutenant Colonel Stanton Coer in a new piece in Marine Gazette. Fifth-generation fighters will win by pointing out the impotence of secular military might. These fighters win by not losing, while we lose by not winning. That's critical. For them, they win just by fighting, and we lose by the impossibility of defeating them. Fifth generation warfare is anchored in the global Islamic jihad espoused by Al-Qaeda, Coer writes, but that doesn't mean that fifth-gen warriors necessarily are clearly ideological with aspirations of setting up alternate political systems. They're opportunists intent only on destruction. But even seemingly pointless violence can have a perverse logic, for the sudden, irrational destruction undermines the idea that nations, and especially the most powerful nation, the U.S., are viable in the modern world. All right, I'm going to talk about something called Thucydides Trap. If you've heard of it, move on. If you haven't, Thucydides Trap, also referred to as Thucydides' Trap, the possessive, is a term coined by American political scientist Graham T. Allison to describe an apparent tendency towards war when an emerging power threatens to displace an existing great power as the international hegemon. It was coined and is primarily used to describe a potential conflict between the United States and the People's Republic of China. So what Thucydides' Trap is, and I don't think it says it in this article, but 12 out of 16 times historically, when an up-and-coming second-place power is discontent with being in second place, they wage war on the first-place power. So we were talking about, there's only one, in that other older article said there's only one superpower in the world, the United States. Well, now China, even in that short amount of time, has really come on strong. 12 out of 16. So 2 out of 3 times there's been all-out war in that scenario. The up-and-coming superpower wages war on the number one. It's, the second dog takes on the top dog, and there's war. I'm not going to go into the history of this, but in this article, it does talk about how it's being used about China. The term is primarily used and was coined in relation to a potential military conflict between the United States and the People's Republic of China. Xi Jinping, the paramount leader of China, has himself referenced the term, cautioning that we all need to work together to avoid the Thucydides trap. All right, this is kind of when a communist dictator says something, you have to kind of believe the opposite, right? And we in the West get too complacent and think everybody's out for has the best interest of the planet in mind. If everybody had the best interest of the planet in mind, China would not be polluting so dramatically more than anybody else on the planet. If China had the best interest in mind, they would not have kept international flights flying out of Wuhan when they had already banned interior flights from Wuhan. Like, that's the smoking gun on this pandemic. Getting on a little tangent here, but you should think of this pandemic as an attack on the planet, right? An attack. This is the warfare I'm talking about. We are at war. There's an argument whether it was intentional. I can make the argument that it's intentional. I'm going to do that now, but I don't know conclusively that, let's just release this thing and tank the global economy because we don't want to be in second place anymore. Let everybody fall and let us rise in the end. And so the smoking gun, whether it was intentional or not, the smoking gun of China's complicity at the very least, or China's malintent, was the day that they shut down flights from Wuhan to all other parts of China. Like Wuhan airport, they were no longer able to fly to other parts of China, but they were still able to fly internationally, guaranteeing the spread of this virus outside of Wuhan, outside of China. This could have been contained, at least much more contained, and over 1 million people are dead today because it wasn't contained. All right, that's the smoking gun. That's part of the warfare. And another part of the warfare is anybody that calls you xenophobic for talking bad about China. That is propaganda warfare. That's part of the warfare we're in. Also, the investment in our culture and our economy. There are Chinese companies that have just been banned from the stock market because all of their numbers were inflated. Like the United States wanted this great global community, and they allowed these Chinese companies to come and be a part of our stock exchange, except all of their numbers were inflated. And then in the middle of this thought, subscribe. If I haven't said this, subscribe and share. This is important information to get out there. We are at war. It's not just Nagorno-Karabakh and Azerbaijan. The whole world is at war. The United States is at war. We need to side with Nagorno-Karabakh, recognize statehood for Artsakh, but we also need to recognize we are at war. All right, so the Chinese businesses that have been allowed into the stock market, well, when you qualify, whatever it's called, to be in this New York Stock Exchange, there are certain conditions, which means your books need to be open to review by a governing authority. I don't know the terms and the names, but the Chinese have an exemption because they're communist. They don't let the West look at their books. Yet we allowed them into our stock exchange anyway. And there's several Chinese companies in the last couple of years that have collapsed. They've been kicked out because they were inflating their numbers. That's China. That's warfare. That's economic warfare. All right. I'm going to wrap this up here, but we are at war. We are at war.